Welcome along to 98 Not Out. Today, I've got Ali Martin from The Guardian, and we are talking all things Ashes. Remember, if you like this podcast and this content, or even me, give it a like, subscribe, and make sure you follow all of our great content. Ali, good morning to you. You're up in sunny Birmingham, or is it sunny up in Birmingham?
It is sunny today. Yeah, it's been tipping it down for the last few days, but it's quite nice today. So yeah, nice to get the washing dried and what have you.
It's not going to rain for finals day tomorrow, is it?
It's I couldn't give you any guarantees that far ahead. To be honest, I've been studying the Old Trafford weather, and it looks like a pretty ropey week next week. So I think we're going to be dodging showers there as well. So, but yeah, all my focus is on that Test match. You're right. I should have thought about finals day, but I'm sure they'll get.
We're not here to talk about. We're not here to talk about white ball. We're here to talk about proper Test match cricket. It doesn't get any better in my book than the Ashes, and this series is not letting me down at all. I was like a kid at Christmas ahead of it with excitement. Bazball meets Ozball, and after 3 tests, we've probably had more dramas than you can shake a stick at. More things to talk about. So I'm just wondering where we start. Let's start with selection for Old Trafford. Were you surprised at an unchanged squad?
Not massively surprised, if I'm honest. Not that Stokes and McCullum are sort of blindly loyal. I think if you spoke to guys like Ben Folkes and Alex Lees, they'd probably say that they're not hugely loyal. So, yeah. But in terms of being mid-series, I think probably the only decision they had to make was whether Johnny needed either the gloves taking off him or taking out the firing line altogether. He obviously had a very tricky test at Headingley. 3 drop catches, which sort of continues quite a tricky series behind the stumps for him generally. But given where they're at and the fact that they want to get 5 bowlers into their team now, with Stokes not really considered one. They want Bairstow's extra batting even more than before. Yes, he didn't fire at Headingley, but I think they obviously think he's got a higher ceiling there. And now it's a case between now and that, that first ball, whether he's whether his confidence can be restored and to try and get him, feeling good about himself, because there's no doubt in Leeds, and it might have even been a hangover from the events at Lords on that last day, but he had the weight of the world on his shoulders, and it really showed in his cricket.
Yeah, he didn't look. That's a great way to put it. I mean, his expression, his demeanour was not the sort of Johnny that we might have been used to, and I think that's coming through in his performance. But it kind of points to redemption at Old Trafford. I think you might see a bit of the flashes of Johnny of old, and probably and possibly with the bat, because that's what we want to see. We want to see a big Johnny ton with 4s and 6s. The Johnny of old 4s and 6s flashing over the boundary rope. I think it tees up nicely for that.
Yeah. I mean, he's been described as the spirit animal of Bazball, hasn't he? He was the fire starter last summer, and he's sort of almost never as good as when he's got a point to prove and his back to the wall a little bit, and perhaps when he feels the world's against him a little bit. Having said that, I thought that would come through at Headingley. I thought the events of that final day at Lords with the stumping by Alex Carey, I thought that would possibly light a fire under him on his home ground. It wasn't to be. In fact, the biggest takeaway from that Test match, I thought, was how it was kind of fresh minds who came into that game who actually dominated on both sides. You saw Wood and Wokes come in. Moeen Ali had a good little test with the ball. I thought a couple of vital wickets there. And on the Australian side of the ledger, we saw Mitch Marsh come in. So it was those kind of clear minds after that sort of massive opprobrium, and you and your fellow MCC members berating them in the long room. So I think I kind of expected Johnny to fire there, but maybe he just probably needs this break that we've got now, a bit of time with his new kid. He's obviously just become a dad very recently as well,
young Edward.
And so fingers crossed, he can turn up at Old Trafford with a clear mind, and we can see the best of Johnny Bairstow, because there's no question that the best Johnny Bairstow gets in this England team and tends to dominate attacks.
Mentioned Mitch Marshall as well. I mean, Mitch Marsh. I mean, there's an interesting tale, isn't it? Someone that hasn't played any cricket for yonks, literally, comes back in and turns in a performance like he did. So I think that just sends a message to anyone out there that if you're good enough, you're in. Surely.
Yeah, right. And I mean, as you say, that it was 4 years since his previous Test match, which was that fifth Test at the Oval in 2019. And I've always looked at Mitch Marsh as a player, thinking to myself, well, he is an all-rounder, but he's a batting all-rounder in Australia and he's a bowling all-rounder in England. Well, in the space of about 100 balls, he proved me completely wrong on that first day at Headingley. Obviously, I mean, he was given a chance. Joe Root dropping an absolute goober when he was on 12. But nevertheless, he played beautifully then, and he is probably given Australia as big a selection headache as England have got right now, because Cameron Green has been an integral part of what's got Australia to #1 in the world and to be World Test champions. So how they can accommodate those two players in the same side while keeping their sort of the kind of structure that they've been used to, which is having that bowling all-rounder, an all-rounder at 6, spinner and 3 frontline seamers. That's going to be a tricky one. I think someone's going to miss out there, and I've got a sneaking suspicion that Green, maybe with his hamstring, maybe they can use that as a bit of an excuse to say take a bit of a blow. Maybe he hadn't really set the world alight with the bat so far on this tour, and they might just use that as an excuse to continue with Marsh, who, as well as that 100, did pick up a wicket in each innings as well. He's a very good cricketer, and a very, as I say, it was a Test match. It wasn't just a Test match for new faces and fresh minds. It was a Test match for the good guys as well. You can't get more popular players than Mark Wood and Chris Wokes, and I think Mitch Marsh is in that category as well. I think people kind of root for him these days. Particularly, he had a very long period in his career. People thought he was getting favouritism because of the surname and etc. And the WA connection with Langer. He copped a lot in his time, and I think people are really taking a shine to him now, seeing that what he's overcome and what he brought to that first innings was it made a game of it. I think England would have absolutely walked that Test match if it hadn't been for Mitch Marsh.
Yeah. Going into this series, Australia looked they were World Test champions. They'd beaten India at the Oval, which I thought was a fantastic occasion. I was down there for that. Atmosphere and quality of cricket. Everything just clicked. The weather as well. It was just a fantastic occasion. And the fear was, with Australia's top order, that was going to be a real issue for England. That if we assume that the Bazball era backs themselves to bat out of any situation, the weakness might have come from containing Australia's top order. But for whatever reason, now you could blame it on schedule, fatigue, whatever. To me, they don't seem to have hit their heights. Labuschagne and even Smith haven't sort of ground diamonds to dust in this. You got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, part of it probably comes back to Warner's, the sort of re-emergence of Warner's struggles against Broad. I know that him and Khawaja have put on 3, 50 partnerships at the top of the order, and there's no harder place in the world to open the batting than England. But England's ploy has always been to try and get Labuschagne and Smith against that new ball, get them against the moving ball. We obviously saw Smith's quality shine through with that, sensational 100 at Lords. But they've managed to really suppress Labuschagne quite significantly, I think. One theory I've got on him is that, and it's interesting in the context of Joe Root missing out, choosing not to play for Yorkshire at the start of the season and going to the IPL, even though he was sitting on the bench. It sort of looked to me that Labuschagne came into the Test series having been playing counter cricket. He'd moved over to off stump, trying to guard against the kind of medium pace nibble that, you're trying to protect yourself there. Well, obviously Test cricket is a very different game to the county championship, and I wonder if he's just striving now to find the right place and the right alignment. I mean, he's still chipped in with some runs. He's a quality player, but he still only has 1 century outside of Australia as well. So, this for a guy who has been ranked #1 in the world, that is a big part of his CV, which still needs to be ticked off, I'd say. And I'd say that Stuart Broad in particular, I think huge credit has to go to Stuart Broad for keeping Marnus Labuschagne down in that regard, and probably just planting the seed about 2 months before the series when he started talking about inventing an outswinger. But I think that I do actually think that may have played a little part, and that's all part of the kind of the Stuart Broad show, isn't it? It's not just what happens when he lets go of the ball. So much of it is about the hype that he manages to build up even at 37 years old.
No, he knows how to play the game, doesn't he? And that's what I love about the Ashes more than any other Test nations contest. The Ashes just always brings this pantomime, this drama, this goodies versus baddies. You mentioned, some of the good guys involved in this tournament, but you've got Davey Warner, you've got, I mean, Stuart Broad likes to poke the stick from our side, and Nathan Lyon. I think it's a real shame that we've lost Nathan Lyon to injury for the rest of this series, because he was, we think back to the last time, 2019, and that incredible day at Headingley where Lyon was in the thick of it, and I still remember the cheer when he dropped that almost certain run out right near the end. It's a shame he's not there, but we got Todd Murphy, who's stepped into the big shoes that he's got to fill. What do we know about Todd?
Well, I mean, we know that he has only really bowled outside of England in India prior to this Ashes tour, and that is, and in India, I know there was quite a flat pitch in that last test that they played out there, and he got some important wickets, but essentially he was bowling on spinning pitches. I do look back to the run chase at Headingley just gone and wonder, in fact, I don't even wonder. I know for a fact that Nathan Lyon would have bowled significantly more overs than the 2 that Murphy sent down. So it does look like Cummins doesn't quite have the same faith in Murphy that he does in Lyon. That's probably understandable. There's obviously a sort of 400 or 500 wicket difference there in Test cricket. But it is a massive loss for Australia because of the way that Lyon is able to operate first innings and second innings, and quite often around the wicket to the right-handers. But he's able to tie up an end. He ties up an end and takes wickets and allows the seamers to rotate. I'm not sure Murphy's at that stage of his career where he can do that. Having said that, somewhere like Old Trafford, you're going to want to play a spinner, aren't you? So, I think England will probably look to try and target that. I wouldn't expect to see Scott Boland in this next test. I think England might have sort of slightly bombed him out of the series, potentially. He might possibly come back to for the Oval, where he obviously had a good game at the World Test Championship final. But yeah, England have already sort of knocked him out of the attack, I think, and they'll be looking to target Murphy as well.
Jimmy Anderson, Old Trafford, Ashes. Is it kind of... is it the stars aligning for this one?
Well, yeah, except, I mean, England have got a decision to make there. And if we look at the way that, I think the biggest difference in Headingley was clearly Mark Wood and what he's brought to England's attack there. I think partly what he did to Khawaja in the first innings, Khawaja having been such an obdurate player up to that point, and also just absolutely vaporizing the tail as well. So he's played a big part in that, and it just makes me wonder whether they might double down on that and go for Josh Tongue. But that will involve, using head over heart, because there is obviously huge sentimental, thing there with Jimmy. What could possibly be his last test on his home ground, with his name at the end, where he'd probably be running in from. Actually, I think he prefers the other end. I think, but anyway, that's a small detail. But yeah, so it's going to be a really interesting selection decision they've got to make there. Having said that, I mean, he must have been sitting there at Headingley on the sidelines watching that pitch, the first proper cricket pitch we've seen of the series, and thinking, how did I play on those two snot heaps in the first 2 tests, and then miss out where we're getting good pace and carry and a bit of movement as well. I suspect Jimmy's probably favourite, but I just wonder whether they might want to double down on the pace that was with Josh Tongue coming in alongside Mark Wood.
And I guess looking beyond that to the Oval, it all depends. You talk about head over heart sentimentality and all the rest of it. It depends on the result at Old Trafford. Now, there are a lot of team selection, performances aside, there's a lot of variables, notably the famous Manchester weather. And, having had a few weeks of nice sunshine, it's all gone a bit wobbly again. We saw a bit of rain intervention at Headingley. And I'm not sure that from what I've seen in the weather forecast for next week, it's 100% fantastic. I think rain is going to play a part again. So I think, you talk about whether this is Jimmy's last home test and would it be at his home ground. If they rested him, would they bring him back for the Oval? But if the Oval's going to be a decider, that brings other variables into account. So what do you think England's approach tactically, not selection, but tactically, what will England's approach be to the Old Trafford test?
Well, if weather does become a factor, I mean, we have seen in the past that Ben Stokes has got quite creative in shortened games. I mean, the most extreme example being the Oval test last year against South Africa, which first day lost to rain, second day lost when the Queen died, which is quite a freak occurrence. And then that left a 3-day test match in which England were able to force a win. And we've obviously even seen first test at Edgbaston. He's more than happy to declare 8 down on the first day. So he's someone that will look to push the game on if we are faced with a shortened game. England's record at Old Trafford, I was just looking this up this morning, it's pretty damn good, actually. It's I think since 2001, it's 13 wins, 2 draws, and 1 defeat. And that one defeat was against Australia in the 2019 Ashes. Obviously, Steve Smith got that big double hundred. But it is a pretty happy hunting ground, and obviously it was one of the two. That record is kind of padded out slightly by the fact we had that summer of COVID where there were we had 3 tests there against West Indies and Pakistan, but England did win all 3, and there's not a huge personnel change since then, so they are very familiar with the ground and what they need to do. I think tactically, at Old Trafford you have got those big square boundaries, haven't you? That may even bring in the idea of Josh Tongue as a second bumper merchant in what has been a bit of a bouncer war Ashes, hasn't it? But it's going to be tricky because equally, if you're looking at a bit of cloud cover, a bit of rain, a bit of moisture in the air, and if Jimmy has, really has got the fire in his belly and is able to bowl well in training, then you do well to look past him, wouldn't you? Because I think whichever way England go, they're going to have pretty much all bases covered. Here's a good stat for you. When England play 5 bowlers, as in not Stokes, if Stokes is playing as a bat, whether he's injured or he's just, but when England play 5 frontline bowlers, they've done that. The last 10 times they've done it, they've won every single time, which includes last week. Yeah, so this is actually, I don't know, they kind of stumbled across this formation this summer because of Stokes being unable to bowl after that long stint at Lords. But actually, in recent past, that is a structure which does suit their cricket very well, and does benefit them. The big question really that they've got is who's going to go at number 3, and do you ask Moeen Ali to do that job, which is, which obviously he did in that second innings, and it allowed Harry Brook to unfurl that lovely 75 and the run chase a bit lower down, a bit further away from the new ball, or do you kind of look at it and think, well, Mo's batting average in Test cricket in the last sort of 4 or 5 years, pretty much since 2016, has dropped off significantly. Can you really make him a makeshift number 3 in a must-win Test match? It's a real head scratcher for them. I know that Mo is keen to do it. I know that he's sort of booked in some extra training sessions to work on his batting ahead of that test to make himself available if that's the way the captain and head coach want to go. The decision's not been made yet, but it'll be an interesting one to look out for at training next week, Monday, Tuesday.
Yeah, and I think Mo just seems to be a top bloke and a top team player. And I think, he's happy to sort of almost take one for the team if it allows Root and Brook to bat in more natural positions. And whether it's his ability to stick around and get runs. But I think, it seems to me that he, is happy to go in there if it helps the others.
And that's and Ben Stokes made that point in his press conference afterwards. He said, when I took on this job a year ago, I said I wanted 10 other selfless cricketers, and Moeen Ali is very much the embodiment of that. He's got a big milestone. He's right on the cusp of a big milestone. I keep mentioning it, he keeps not getting it, but he's I think it's about 23 runs away now from 3,000 Test runs, which would make him only the 15th player to get 3,200. And I think if he does it in the next match, he'll have done it in 2 tests quicker than someone like Andrew Flintoff, who we obviously put on the sort of big pedestal as one of England's great all-rounders. So, but Mo I don't think he cares massively now for his own stats. I think, this is a real sort of bonus time for his career. He wasn't expecting this call-up. And wherever the team wants him and whatever job the team needs him to do, he will step up. It's very interesting chatting to some of the players actually after that win off the record, only because, Mo is kind of, he obviously had a sort of almost 2-year exile from the team in retirement. He's come back in, but because of his experience, and he's 36, and because of his role in the sort of white ball teams, 2 World Cup wins and what have you, he slots in right up the top as a senior player, even to the point where, with Stokes, when people talk about, well, who would replace Stokes if he was injured and out of a game as captain, there's even a bit of chat that it could be Mo, which seems, it's quite a turnaround. But yeah, I mean, he's a vital player, and I've got to say, the personal highlight of that last Test match was that sliding tackle shot off on the boundary rope. Not so much the tackle itself, but just the smile on his face when he peeled away from it. He knew he'd done something funny there. So, it's great to see him enjoying his cricket, and with the ball, yes, he's never going to be Jack Leach. He's not a defensive bowler in that way. He's never going to hold up an end, but in a 5-man attack, you can allow him to attack. And those 2 wickets of Smith and Labuschagne, they really were where the game pivoted. I think, on when was it, day 2? It felt like day 4 at the time, but it was day 2.
Yeah. He's a decent footballer. I've seen him exhibiting a few skills, and in some of the sort of play. Do they still have those player versus press matches that used to happen on tour?
No, thank goodness. No, if they did, I'd or something. But no, in fact, to be honest, football's kind of gone out of it. They still do the old keepy ups in the game of pig. And,
no sliding tackles.
Yeah, we've seen too many injuries over the years to keep doing
that. I remember seeing Paul Newman from the Mail blowing hard in one of those games when
yes, was Michael Vaughan? Did Michael Vaughan score a very good goal?
That's right. Yeah. Bumble was a manager or something, I think.
That's right. Bumble was pretending to be Brian Clough on the sidelines.
But so what's I know you press pack are all quite tight, and what's the general chatter amongst you guys at the moment?
It's funny, isn't it? I mean, I think in series gone past, England, it's been incredible that from 2-0 down that people have still kind of retained a bit of faith in this England team. I mean, a lot of that's built on what they've done in the previous year, and obviously probably an acknowledgement that the Edgbaston test is one that really did get away. I think I would have thought possibly that 1-1 was probably a fairer scoreline after 2. But I think people are pretty buoyed. I mean, as I say, it really does go back to Mark Wood. I think to be able to see an English fast bowler, return fire against the Australians, to be the quickest guy in the series. We saw on the last Ashes tour down under, he was pretty much the only English player that stood up, in the heat of battle in that one. But to have him there returning fire, it really does change the complexion of the series, I think. And as I say, it's not just the tail, although I've got to say their back legs were twitching when they were facing him in that first innings.
Yeah.
But it's what it does for the top order as well. I think this rest has come at a good time for him as well, because it was obviously his first competitive cricket since April. But this 8-day gap for him and Chris Woakes to get fully recharged and ready to go again. I think there's a bit of optimism around that England really could make it 2-2 and set up what would be the absolute mother of finales. Before Test cricket goes a little bit dormant for the next 12 months.
Well, yeah. It's probably a conversation for another time, but yes, after the Oval's finished, and that's not that far away now, it's within the fortnight. And we all know why. But yeah, Test cricket, and trying to keep on subject, but Test cricket, we're not into next year before England play again, are we?
No, in fact, I make it. There's one Test series in the next 11 months after this. At the end of this Ashes series, which is 5 tests in India, which obviously is one of the biggest, steepest challenges any team could face. But because of the World T20 that is next June, Test cricket doesn't resume in this country till July. And I'm a massive West Indies fan, but I've got to say that the 6 tests against West Indies and Sri Lanka next summer is not the highest quality fare. I think England would be looking for 2 very strong series wins in those 2. It perhaps hasn't got the same luster as this summer, so it does drop off a bit of a cliff after this summer, and with that, I guess you start to question, well, how long physically can Stokes keep going as captain? How much will he want it? Will he feel like he set the template? Does it still float McCullum's boat, given the big gaps? I mean, he, in some ways he must love his job. He only has to do sort of 6 months a year and big long gaps. I think he's paid about £500,000 for it, so maybe he won't be complaining, but ultimately you sort of think, leadership wise, what does that do long term? And in terms of the players coming through, we are going to have a big drop off in the seam bowling department. I was writing about this yesterday, writing a sort of appreciation of Chris Woakes, because not just because I live just down the road from Edgbaston, but because he's a quality cricketer, and his career has coincided, almost unfortunately, with 3 absolute all-time greats in Anderson, Broad, and Ben Stokes. But Chris Woakes is 34. Anderson's about to turn 41.
Yeah, 41 in the Oval Test.
Stuart Broad is 37. And you've got to think there's going to be a big drop-off in the seam bowling personnel next year looking ahead. And you're asking the question of who are the guys that are going to come in and want it and, really want to dedicate themselves to Test cricket, which, as we know, is the hardest form to do, particularly for a fast bowler, when there's a lot of money to be made out there bowling 4 overs. And that is that's one of the big question marks looking ahead. We're probably getting too far ahead of ourselves there. But I would say that Ollie Robinson is really someone who should be stepping up right now, and really should be leading the attack. But his body's letting him down again, and I think it's a legitimate question to ask whether he is giving himself the best chance. He had a real shock to the system in that last Ashes series away from home, and he did when he pulled out of that Caribbean tour as well with back spasms. He did that summer redouble his efforts, get fit, lose some weight, get trim. And he really put some hard shifts in, particularly on those pitches in Pakistan, which were really impressive. And it just feels like this year there's been a bit of a drop off, because Ollie Robinson, he's never going to be quick, but when he operates at 82 and nips it around, it's really hard work. When he's doing that at 77, 78, it's a little bit of powder puff, and batters find it easy. People will say he's got 10 wickets, 25 in this series. What are you complaining about? I think he's dipped his bread a little bit to picking up a few tail end wickets. I would be looking at him to say, come on, Ollie, you're 29 now. The big guns are about to head off, into the sunset. This is now or never, really.
Yeah. Very interesting how this will be after the Ashes. But to sort of wrap up, I'm going to put you on the spot. Admitting, what's going to be the result at Old Trafford?
Well, as I say, going back to that incredible record that England have got there, I'm going to say, yeah, I think England are going to win. I suspect there's so little between these two teams. We're going to see another nerve jangler. But I really think that it almost feels written in the stars that this one's heading for a decider at the Oval, and the absolute mother of all Test matches. And possibly there's the odd whisper, possibly that Sky may even share the coverage of that with Channel 4 if it occurs, which would be mega news if it happens. Sky have been having record audiences this summer for their own coverage, but we know that when they double up, you can really hit numbers approaching 9-10 million in this country, and I think that, and particularly for Test cricket, would be amazing.
Yeah, and then it would just that Oval Test, if that's the case, will be just absolutely amazing. Ali Martin from The Guardian, always great to catch up. Love talking to you, and enjoy your job. I'm always really jealous about people that get paid to go and watch cricket, but there you go. Although I hear you don't get paid very much though, so it's not the Baz McCullum 500 grand, is it?
No, we're very lucky what we do, and particularly in summers like this one.
All right, great to chat, and we'll catch up soon.
Cool. Cheers, mate.